I had been researching retirement destinations for a few years. I had a long list of countries that I wanted to visit, but narrowing them down to a few I could actually go and visit was difficult. Things that were important to me when I could finally retire were great weather, great beaches, great beautiful locals, and affordability. Affordability was the most important, and of course safety. The countries I had on my list included Colombia, Brazil, Thailand, and the Philippines. I'd never even left the States, but I knew I couldn't afford to retire there. With the help of the internet, though, I decided to first go and visit the Philippines. This was a few years away from when I could finally retire, but I thought it was a good time to see what things were like. As soon as I arrived in the Philippines, I knew there was no point me going anywhere else. The Philippines was great. I arrived in Manila, and it was very different than what I was expecting, but it was better in almost every way. I stayed in Makati for a few days. It's a long flight from where I came from, and I think I stayed in the hotel for over a day before I was ready to actually go out. But when I did go out, it felt like I was already home. I was ready to retire now. I did the usual things you do in Makati, had meals at the filling station, drinks in the bars, and just enjoyed myself more than I had for a long time. Like many people of my age, I was divorced, and the girls in the Philippines made the girls at home feel irrelevant. I'd learned enough from my research to know that you don't meet a girl in a bar, especially a bar on P. Burgos Street, but it was fun hanging out with some of them and just seeing what the game was. So different to life back home. I narrowed down some of the places I wanted to move when I retired. Bohol was at the top of the list. Cebu was also on my list, as was Leyte. Leyte, because a YouTuber I used to watch lived there with his wife and child. They had a house there, and he seemed to be living life right. But after I'd been in Manila long enough, I flew down to Cebu. That's when the Philippines just kept getting better. It felt different to Manila. Not as big, but definitely big enough, and it felt more green and picturesque, not to mention the beaches that were there. I met up with some expats that I'd met online who swore that Cebu was the best place to live in the Philippines, saying how you couldn't go wrong. I was believing them. This place was indeed awesome, and I spent some great days there before getting on the 2-hour ferry to Bohol. There wasn't as much going on in Bohol, but if anything, I thought the beaches there were even more beautiful. I stayed at a really nice resort. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it, and it felt like it was in the early stages of development. Roads that have since been paved weren't paved before, new shops opening, new gas stations, and I fell in love with the island. I didn't get to Leyte on that trip. I had to return home and back to work, but I left knowing that the Philippines was going to be my retirement destination. The only question was, when was I going to retire? I was 50 and had about $1 million in assets, including my house. And I think I had it in my mind that I needed a lot more than this to be able to retire. But I understood that if I moved to the Philippines, it was so much more affordable. And I came to the conclusion that I was able to retire right now. Sell my house, put everything into an index fund, and conservatively, if I got 5% a year, I'd never eat into my savings, and I'd have $50,000 a year to live on. In the Philippines, that's a great income, and I could live very well for that. I knew I could because I'd been there. I was in the Philippines on vacation mode, and I still wasn't spending that amount of money. I continued to work while my house was for sale, and I was fortunate enough that I managed to sell it quickly, and I invested everything into an index fund which historically had made 7% a year on average. I don't know why I didn't think of doing that before. If I'd visited the Philippines 5 years ago, when I had less money, I could have still retired then. I could have retired 5 years ago and wouldn't have had as much income, but it would have still been more than enough to live well in the Philippines. When I told my kids I was moving to the Philippines permanently, that I'd finished work and I was retired now, they thought I was joking. I'd never talked about my interest to move or retire to a different country, but they fully supported me and wished me well. They were both at university, so I gave them $10,000 each as a bit of help in hand, and I flew back to Manila. This time, I was there for good. But I didn't stay in Manila for very long. I wanted to go back down to Cebu and Bohol. I wasn't going to rush into choosing where to live. I had no plans at this point to buy a house or build a house. I just had plans to enjoy my retirement and the fruits of all the years I had worked. I kept extending the visa over the next months, and I had decided that Bohol is where I wanted to live. I liked that it was still in the early development stage. I liked that it was a bit further away from the main action, but you could still fly there to Manila if you needed to. Couldn't fly to any other places from there, but I didn't need to do that. I rented a place in Panglao. It was only 5 minutes from the airport, but I never heard any planes, which is what I appreciated. My retirement life started off just as I envisaged. I met up with other expats and was enjoying everything about my new life. My income was more than enough to do nearly everything I wanted to. I found myself going to really nice resorts once a month, spending a couple of $100s a night, and I'm just living what I imagined my retirement would be. But I'm getting lonely. I was looking for company, and I thought back to the YouTuber I watched who got married to a girl from Leyte and built a house there and had a family. I wasn't looking to have any kids again. That was the furthest away from what I wanted to do. But maybe I could get back in the dating scene. I joined Pina Love dating site, and there were so many local girls, all of them looking so beautiful, all looking for someone, like me, a foreigner. It's incredible how many times I was contacted as soon as I put up my profile, and my first mistake, though, was entertaining girls that were too young for me. I was being contacted by girls in their 20s, and I quickly had to get my head straight and realise that this wasn't in my best interest. Because there were just so many girls getting in touch with me, I could afford to be very picky. So I decided I wouldn't entertain any girls that were younger than 35. I didn't want any girls that had kids already, and that was all I was looking for. That really narrowed down my options. It's quite hard to find a girl at that age that didn't have kids yet, but there were more than you would think, and I had my first date with a girl a week or so later. We didn't really hit it off, which wasn't a problem, because I had another date lined up for the following day. She was stunning, 36, no kids, and worked in the local area. She seemed to have a good job and be very career-orientated. At least that's what she told me. And when I asked why she'd never been married before, she just said she never found the right guy and she was concentrating on her career. She said she was from a very poor area and she'd seen other people having kids too soon that would trap them and make their lives more difficult. I thought she sounded really smart, and I asked if she wanted to go on a date again later. We went on a second date later on, and I felt like we were really clicking. We seemed to have the same ideas and the same hopes of what we wanted from life. And she gave me more information about herself. She had a lot of brothers and sisters who lived on the island with her mother and father, and she was one of the people who provided most for the family. I thought that what she was saying sounded great. I didn't know yet about the family situation in the Philippines. If only I had. I did have another date lined up with another girl, but again I just didn't really click with her, so I decided to turn off my profile and concentrate on the girl that I had the biggest connection with. I don't want to give her name, but let's just call her Mandy. On our next date, we went to a really great restaurant that served American food the way it should be done, Mahalo. That became one of my regular go-to places to eat. We had a great meal, and afterwards we went to a resort that had chairs on the beach and had some drinks. It's hard to stress just how beautiful the beaches are in the Philippines. I know I hadn't seen beaches in other countries around the world, but when you're watching videos about them, the Philippines seems to be on a different level, even to similar countries in the region. The crystal clear blue ocean, maybe it makes you make decisions that you may later regret. Let's just say I was enjoying Mandy's company, and before I knew it, she'd moved in with me. She didn't work close to where I lived, but it wasn't an issue because my lease was up for renewal. I'd only taken it on short-term basis, so we went to look for somewhere that was closer to her work. I wasn't ready to tell her to stop working. Her salary wasn't bad in comparison to what many people earned, and I felt it gave her some independence to be able to work, and she didn't seem to want to quit either yet. We found a place in Tagbilaran City, and now I was living together with Mandy. It was a shock to the system to be living with someone for the first time in years. I'd been divorced back home, and I never wanted to try even date in America anymore. It felt like a disaster in the making, and I put it off until retirement, until when the time was right. And being in the Philippines, I definitely felt like it was right, and I was moving in the right direction. I felt like one of the unluckiest expats on the island. Here I was with a great girl who had a stable job and who didn't have any kids. What more could anybody ask for? She did tell me that she wanted kids at some point, but I managed to talk her out of that, saying that let's just live our lives together, at least for the time being. I was getting serious with her, and we spent a couple of great months together. She'd get back from work, and we'd go get something to eat, and I took up hobbies in the day when she was working. Walking, reading. It was probably too hot to walk, but I did it anyway, and I got a bike and just drove around the island and explored. We were at a small resort in Anda, on the other side of the island, on a weekend getaway, and I felt like it was time to take things with Mandy a bit further. I was getting on with her, and she was making my retirement even better. I thought the age gap wasn't too bad, which many people also agreed with me on, and I asked about what she would think of her quitting her job so she could spend more time together with me and maybe travel around the Philippines together. She did seem excited by this prospect, not having to work anymore. I could more than support her. My income was better than I was hoping it was going to be, and I still had money left over at the end of the month, even after going to nice resorts often. It was decided that she would stop working, but the thing we didn't talk about was her need for money. She'd never asked for money from me before. I was paying for everything every time we went out, the rent on the place we lived, and I was putting all the bills, which is what I was expecting to have to do. But I never expected her to want any money from me directly. I just thought any time she wanted something, she would ask, and if it was reasonable, I would get it. But she said before she needed to stop working, I'd have to be able to give her a certain amount of money every month so that she could still be her own self and not be fully reliant on me to buy everything. I suppose that made sense. I could understand her wanting some level of independence and not feeling that she had to ask me all the time. So we agreed on 20,000 pesos per month. It was slightly less than she used to make from her job, but it was fair and would be able to go around the Philippines without any hindrance of her having a full-time job. I hadn't met her family yet. She'd often go off and visit them and come back and asked if it was time for me to go and visit. We were serious after all. We'd been together nearly 6 months, and Mandy agreed. I never seen that side of the Philippines before, the shanties and the poverty. I mean, I've seen it, but I've never been part of it until that moment. That being said, her family were really friendly. They asked if we were going to get married, and Mandy looked at me with a smile, and I said, maybe soon. The brothers and sisters were mostly younger than her. Most of them still lived at home, all sharing one room. It was something I'd never seen before, and it did come as a surprise. Before we left, Mandy asked if I could give her family some money. I didn't think, no, definitely not. She'd never asked before for her family, but I also didn't think this would become a big part of our lives. I gave them 10,000 pesos, and we were back off to where we lived. That meeting with the family did change me. I couldn't believe how people lived in such conditions, and that's where Mandy actually came from. It did make me realize perhaps why she was with me. Better opportunities, chance for a better life. But I was with her for a better life, and she gave me more happiness than my old wife did, and I decided that I wanted to get married, and I asked her one weekend when we were at a resort. The contrast between the resort and where she grew up was incredible, and I felt bad spending the amount of money I spent at the resort, knowing how far it would go for some people who struggle so much in the Philippines. To cut a long story short, we got married. That was a process that I don't want to go through again. It took ages to get everything sorted out, but it was fun to have a deeper connection with her, and I hoped it would lead to me getting residence in the Philippines later down the line. That would have been great, to never have to worry about doing a visa again or leaving the country, where I didn't want to. It sounded like it would be a really good thing to do. I'm still hoping for that. When we got married, we had a small party. Her whole family came. I didn't have anyone from my side coming. My kids couldn't make it because they were too busy, and I probably wouldn't have wanted them there anyway, if I'm being honest. It didn't feel different being married. But I think it felt different for Mandy. I think she felt like she was now more emboldened to ask for things, and it was always for the family. We always had family members round to our house. We were always going to visit her family, far more than we used to do before. And in the early stages of being married, I wasn't really having any issues with this. I just chalked it up as being part of life in the Philippines. I think getting married was the biggest mistake. If I'd stayed with Mandy without being married, things may have been easier. But as soon as we got married, she wanted more and more. And it was for her family that she wanted it for. It wasn't for herself. I didn't mind when I was asked once for 10,000 pesos, but then every week you're getting people asking you for money from the family. Her 18-year-old brother wants some new shoes, 2,000 pesos. Sounded like a lot for shoes, but that's what it was. 22-year-old sister wanted me to pay for her job interview in Cebu. Her parents wanted me to fix their roof, and it was never-ending and relentless. I was going with it because I could afford the amount I was giving, but it was eating into my lifestyle. I didn't want to change the way I was living because the girl I married had a family who were taking advantage of me. Were they taking advantage of me though, or was it just a Filipino thing? Mandy was asking for more as well. She said now we were married, she should get 30,000 pesos a month instead of 20,000. I went along with it and gave it to her, but then she said we needed a car. We didn't need a car. What did we need that for? But she said we needed one, we're married now, and it would look better if we had one. So I bought a car. And all the while I'm thinking that this would die down soon and she'd get it out of her system once or now that she was married. She'd never been married before, and I think because she was married for the first time, she thought she was able to act differently than when she wasn't married, and that was starting to become a problem for me after 3 months of handing over money to random family members that I'd never met before. I couldn't believe what was going on, and I had to finally talk to Mandy and say, I'm not happy for this to continue. I'm not here to provide for your family. I'm afraid that's just not going to happen or continue. I can afford to look after us, and I can very occasionally give money to certain family members when it's an actual real-life emergency, and only I will determine what an emergency is. She said she understood, but whether she did or not, I will never know. But it wasn't stopping. It was always someone getting in touch wanting something, and I told Mandy, if someone gets in touch with you asking for money, don't even ask me. But she still continued to ask me every time someone got in touch with her. And I was starting to get really upset. We'd only been married for 6 months at this point, and I felt like it was a mistake. I loved Mandy and spending time with her, and I wanted to be with her. I saw myself being with her indefinitely. It's not that I didn't like her family. They were friendly people, always respectful towards me. But was it really respectful because the requests for money never seemed to stop? Time was going on, and I was not enjoying myself anymore. We didn't go to resorts anymore for special weekends away. I was just too angry with the fact that Mandy was continuing to let her family walk all over me. And after being married for nearly a year, I told her you're going to have to make a choice. You can have your 30,000 pesos a month, but anything your family wants has to come out of that. If you ask me for money again, I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. I'm simply not. I've moved to the Philippines to retire. I've married to you and I love you, but your family are really not my problem. And that's when she looked at me, with a strange look on her face, like you married me, that means you married my family. She didn't quite put it like that, but that's what she was trying to say to me. And then it dawned on me that perhaps this was expected in the culture of the Philippines. I'd spoken to other expats who had been married to Filipinas, but we'd never talked much in detail about things like this. Had I not done enough research? That could be the problem. The next time I was out with a friend of mine, didn't meet up with him often, but he was married to a Filipina, and I asked if he had the same problem with her family, and he said yes, but he just learned to live with it and accept that's part of the life in the Philippines, especially if you marry a province girl. I asked him if it didn't bother him. He told me it bothered him greatly, but he's learned to accept it. He also has a child with his wife, and built a house, so he's probably more trapped than I was, at least at this point, and I asked him what he did about it. He looked and said he moved to the Philippines, get in a relationship with the same girl, but I wouldn't have a child and wouldn't get married, and the first request of money from the family member I'd be gone. And I'd make it clear to her that that's what my intentions were, and she'd be the one who would have to accept it or not. That's what he said he would do again if he had his chance. What was I to do? I could afford the money I was being asked for, but it felt like I was being taken advantage of. I had another talk with Mandy and told her how it was nothing like where I came from. I know I was living in the Philippines, but you're married to me, and I'm not from the Philippines, so you have to give some ground as well. I didn't want to separate from her. I knew how difficult divorce was in the Philippines, and I loved being with her. And I honestly feel like she loved being with me as well. But her family came first, and that was clear, and I needed to talk to her and come to some sort of agreement where I wouldn't be asked for random amounts of money ever again. I think Mandy could see I was serious, and she said, "How about you give me 50,000 pesos a month, and then any time my family asks for money, I will give it to them." I just said okay. I didn't like it, but I accepted it, and it works for us. That is still the arrangement we have. I really don't like it, and I'm being honest when I say I don't like it, and every time I hand over the money, I feel like I'm being taken for a ride. But aside from that, every other part of the month is great. We did end up having a kid, not very long ago. I didn't want one, but it happened, and I'm going to be one of those old dads. I wonder if we're living in the best place for my son to grow up. I don't want to return to the States, and when he finishes university, I'll be well into my 70s if I live that long. I'm just lucky that the income I have, and even after giving money to her family, the 50,000 a month, I still have more than enough for us to have a great life. I had no idea I was marrying her family as well. I think we came to a fair arrangement, albeit one that I really don't like, but I've lived with it. And now we have a son. Mandy does see the benefit of keeping the money for him and his future. To her credit, she has never asked for more than the 50,000 pesos, and I know she gives most of it to her family, and I just have to accept that. I'll leave it there now. Just one thing that I wanted to say to any guys who want to have a Filipina girlfriend or wife. Know their family, and know that if you marry her, you've got the family as baggage. I nearly let it end my marriage, but I grit my teeth every time I hand over the money, because the alternative is worse, and I have accepted that. But this is a warning. Get married in the Philippines, and you're marrying her family as well. You have been warned.